Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us at tonight's webinar, the Junior Year Jumpstart. I am Andy and this is Kelsey, and we will be giving you a close and personal look at the current admissions landscape and its recent impacts on the recent impacts such as policies on standardized testing and the SCOTUS decision on affirmative action. We will also share tips on finding your best right fit college and what you can do now to get there. And of course, some mistakes to avoid. Tonight, first, a couple of things before we get started. Because the theme is all about Jumpstart, we want to give you a Jumpstart in the form of a $100 off our incredible 90-minute two-counselor student assessment for admissions. So go ahead and scan the QR code that Kelsey just put up on your screen to get our fabulous giveaways after the event, and feel free to pop any questions into the comments box as we go. We'll save time for questions at the end of our conversation for this evening as well. We're excited to get started into these many topics this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kelsey, our Director of Client Services. Take it away, Kelsey.
Thanks so much, Andy. I'm super excited to get into this topic tonight and to change our focus from all of our seniors who are doing amazingly well to some juniors. So first, I want to start with common mistakes. I know that that's something that everybody's always worried about, like what are the things that I shouldn't be doing that maybe I don't know that I shouldn't be doing. So we're going to kind of pop that pimple right off the bat and go through some common mistakes. The first one is, of course, starting too late. When you start in fall of senior year, which is when many students actually get started, you're starting on top of your hardest courses. Seniors or juniors, I'm sorry to tell you this, but senior year is actually when you often will have your hardest courses. Not a breeze, like people often say. It's also when you're going to have your biggest leadership opportunities. So you're doing that on top of trying to do college research, trying to learn how to write these essays. You're really inviting a maelstrom of stress. The second one is lack of meaningful involvement during high school. And while when you get to senior year, this is not something you can make a big change to. Right now, as a junior, you still have a lot of control over what you are involved in outside of the classroom as a junior. So the key word here is the word meaningful. Colleges are always looking for authenticity. So don't be a box checker. Don't do things because someone once told you that that's the activity everybody does that gets them into college. That activity doesn't exist. It's really about what the activities all mean to you. And by the way, that also makes for a more meaningful high school experience for you, which is even more important. The next one is essays that fall flat. The fact is, and I want you to take some comfort in this, is that no student basically has done this type of writing before they sit down at the writing table to write their college essays. It's just not a type of writing that is taught in high school. So you're trying to knock something out of the park on your first try doing it. And when you start in fall of senior year, you're not allowing your essay time to develop. I always say that the best essays are very much like cheese. You're not going to spend necessarily, it's a one-page essay for your common app personal statement. It doesn't take that long to write, but to make it really good, you have to start it early and then allow it to kind of age and develop over time. The next one is underestimating your strengths on the application. And while I can totally understand that it can feel awkward to be bragging about everything that you've done, let me tell you that this is not the time to be humble. You want to think about not only the things you did in official capacity and what your specific involvement was, but everything that was meaningful. So not just the stuff that was for an official thing like a club or a summer program or something like that. As an example, we had a student last year who built a vintage arcade from scratch just because he thought it would be fun. He spent hours, months, years on this, and it was definitely something we included in his application. The next one is worrying about the wrong things. Things like, actually, you might be surprised to hear this from a college counselor, but taking way too many APs, thinking that colleges want things like perfection out of a student, those are not actually what colleges are looking for. They're looking for real live 16 and 17-year-old students who are excited to be part of a new community. Now, you want to have rigor, but you don't need to take every single AP offered or drive yourself crazy over that. Also, worrying about what everybody else is saying, what everybody else is doing. TikTok and what everybody is saying gets you in or doesn't get you in. Try to kind of quiet that noise and focus on what is true for you. And then the last one is kind of a bonus common mistake, which is a mismatched college list. We'll get into like what a good quality list is all about, but I'll just say that if you don't apply to a school you actually have no chance of getting in. And so that college list actually dictates your outcomes in many, many ways. So you want to make sure you give yourself time to research and learn about yourself and learn about all the colleges that are out there for you.
Absolutely, Kelsey. That's such great advice. And fortunately, juniors, because you were here, or parents of juniors, because you were here, you're going to get some great information tonight about how to avoid some of those mistakes. And I will say one I have actually seen that is very preventable, although not an easy choice to make sometimes, is when a student is overcommitted. Students, again, back to the APs or the honors, the rigorous course load, or perhaps the overly involved student who is doing robotics and student body president and captain of the sports team. All great things, but if your child or if you, the student, you're unhappy, you're stressed, you're constantly sick, these are signs that you might need to make an adjustment and reprioritize. So keep that in mind. With that said, start early as you are doing now. Kudos to you for being here. You're already halfway there. Your college list is your guide, and Kelsey alluded to this before. It's the roadmap to the work you'll do. It's the call to research to have your list done as early as June, which then allows kind of this ripple effect of having your supplements ready, knowing what's being asked of you, your essays ready, just so that senior year, when you are taking that rigorous curriculum, you're not feeling this immense weight of the application process while all those other things are going on. Aim for authenticity. Kelsey mentioned this earlier. Don't just do something to check a box, rather do something because it brings you joy or curiosity or challenges you in a really positive way. I would also encourage you that if you are doing something that you think maybe this isn't filling my bucket, this is kind of checking a box, talk to an adult, have a conversation with somebody about that. You might be able to make a change. Reach out and ask for support. Speaking of talking to adults, be familiar with your counselors, your teachers, your other trusted adults, and certainly the policies, deadlines, and programs at your school. They are key players in this process in terms of sending you materials by the time you do apply. Also writing letters of recommendation, and that brings us to teacher recommendations, which we can tell you a lot more about. There are some common myths with asking teachers who to write, and then there's some other really good strategies that we can share with you. As for testing, now would be a good time to take the practice ACT if you haven't, and compare that against your PSAT score. Students tend to do better on one test versus the other. And the reality is that even in our landscape of majority test optional schools right now, this can help you increase your chances of admission if you take PSAT or ACT and you do well on it. With that, I'll hand it back over to Kelsey to talk a little bit more about list development.
These are great pro tips, Andy. And I just wanted to underline something that you said that I think is really important, which is asking for support. This is a really complicated process, and it's one that as students, you haven't had practice getting ready for, really, right? High school does a great job of preparing you for college, but it doesn't necessarily focus on the things you need to do to actually apply to college. So don't try to feel like you have to do this alone. Don't try to do it alone. Reach out to your counselor at your high school. If you feel like you need extra support, feel free to reach out to us. Utilize our resources. We have lots and lots of free resources. Of course, we love working with students directly. So get in touch with us if we can support your process as well.
100%.
Yeah. And so to talk about this college list, right, which is really your roadmap, one thing that I'll mention is this is a huge advantage as a junior. Learn about colleges early. Right now, yes, you are not years away from your college application year, but you still do have the luxury of time. And one thing that you may not realize is that when you are going to research colleges, whether that is through doing an online, virtual information session, whether that's through reading up on their college website or Instagram stalking a college, or even going in person on-campus visit, when you are learning about colleges, really you are learning just as much about yourself and what you like, what resonates with you. It's kind of like I always make a kind of analogy with shopping. You might go into a store and you might see a jacket that is really, really attractive on the hanger, and you put it on and it fits just perfectly. Or you might put it on and the fabric is kind of itchy, or it's just a little too tight in the shoulder. So when you go and you visit colleges, you want to listen to those instincts that you have. And you might have those kind of almost physical, like visceral reactions when you are on a campus, or when you're listening to an admissions officer talk about their college, or when the colleges come and visit your campus in the fall, like they're doing right now. So really take advantage of the plethora of information that's out there for you, and then listen to your reactions to that as a student and also as a parent, right? You know your child. Really pay attention to those instincts that you have, because that is what's going to help you narrow into fit. And as you start to do this low stakes exploration, even in fall of junior year, you're going to be learning so much more. You're gathering things for kind of your basket of wants and don't wants, of like, okay, I felt really comfortable on Occidental's campus, of course, because that's where I went. But on Occidental's campus, because I liked how small and community driven it was, and it's also gorgeous. But I felt less comfortable on UCLA's campus because it just felt like I was in the middle of the city. Or you might feel the opposite, obviously, right? But you get those examples, and then you can start to say, okay, I really want to be in a city, but I really would like a college that's a little smaller where I can get to know my professors. But I want to make sure that I have internship opportunities, right? So it's all about thinking, what would you want for this experience? The other thing is, like I said, you can do virtual information sessions, you can do college visits, you can also do online, you can listen to online interviews, you can listen to online videos. There's a lot of information after the pandemic that's on the World Wide Web right now that you can take advantage of. But doing that college research, doing some kind of tour, whether it's virtual or in person, it's vital to your understanding of these colleges, to your fit. And in the end, it's going to be vital to your admissibility, because colleges are looking for fit as well. The last thing I'll say about this that's really important is I want you to be brave and really honestly interrogate your admissibility on these campuses. We're going to go into a little bit about how to do that in a moment, but when we talk about mismatched college list, try to move away from the idea of brand. It's appropriate to reach, of course, right? Like, you've probably worked really hard in high school, and we want you to reach as it's appropriate, but we also don't want you to be reaching for something that is impossible given your particular profile, or that's not really going to be that perfectly fit jacket for you, right? Like, we want you to thrive on campus. So it's really important that you pay attention to where you are going to have a strong, medium, or weak but still possible chance of getting in, and be really brave when you're looking at that, because it's not a qualitative judgment of who you are as a person. It's just about you applying to places that are going to like you as much as you like them. So that's a little bit about formulating your list. And we're going to now get into, like, how do you understand admissibility? What are colleges even looking for? Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I will just say one thing back to your slide, Kelsey, which is the college visits, the online interviews in particular, forms of demonstrated interest. I'll talk about this a little bit more. We could do an entire session on demonstrated interest, quite frankly, but as the term would indicate, this is the interest you are demonstrating to the college, the love you are showing them, right? And that's certainly not just done through campus visits, but high school visits, high school reps visiting your school, filling out, interacting with their emails, clicking links. So just bear that in mind as well. In terms of what colleges are looking for, I'd like to think of you have you think of this as a painting, okay? So if you've ever been in a museum and have had that wonderful experience where you see a painting that catches your eye, you stand back, you slowly walk closer, and you see how much that painting changes. You notice the details, maybe you even see very brand new things that you didn't see 20 feet away. I think that's a way to think about the college admission process in terms of what they see. They're looking at this painting, and that starts with your academic strength, your transcript. Very easy to focus on the GPA. We get that, and that's fine, but really it's less about that number. It's more about how that number is being formed and calculated. In other words, what is the strength of your curriculum, the rigor? The colleges will look at the profile of your high school to see how many APs and honor courses are available, or IB perhaps. How many of those did you take? And as Kelsey mentioned earlier, they don't expect you to take them all, but rather focus on the areas of strength for you, the areas of enjoyment, maybe the areas that you want to pursue in college, and hopefully there's a match there in terms of those AP and honor courses. So increasing rigor, SAT, ACT, AP scores. I will come back to this shortly to talk a little bit more about testing, given kind of this unusual landscape we're in. Community involvement and leadership. These are areas included on your application in terms of service, jobs, sports, arts, whatever it might be for you. And if you're someone who's not really sure what that looks like for you, or maybe you're someone where everything is dedicated to one thing, be it arts or sports, that's okay too. It's going to look a little bit different for everyone. An authentic essay and essay work, and I think hopefully by now you've heard the message in terms of how to get there. Start early, do some exercises, journaling, keep tabs on what you like, what you don't like, what's giving you a strong reaction to something in terms of emotion. Those are indicators that will be helpful in terms of you figuring out what is going to be a great topic to write on. Okay. Letters of recommendation, also very important. We talked about that earlier, and then demonstrated interest. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the vast majority of colleges are going to be asking you supplemental questions in addition to your main common application essay or personal statement questions for the UC, just as an example. Not all of them do this, but if they do, a lot of those questions are getting at why are you applying to us, okay? And let's just use NYU, for example. Great school. A lot of you have probably been to New York. It's a fabulous city. You've had a great time there. But I guarantee you the admission officers at NYU have heard kind of that story over and over again. So once again, this is where you need to be a little bit more specific and connect your core drivers and values to those of NYU or any other such school to be able to answer that effectively. And by the way, in about 250 words or less. So do keep that in mind. Juniors, this is your time to move the needle on your admissibility. Put all of your best work into your courses. Be intentional about how you're spending your time outside of school and what you're doing with your summer. And start practicing writing, just as I mentioned, capturing what's going on in your life and how you feel about it. As far as testing goes, we are in a test blind, test optional, test mandatory world. It's just kind of all across the board. Really, there are very few colleges, about 13 to 15 or so in the US, that truly still require a test score. So let's just start there. Test optional means colleges will review test scores if you choose to submit that. However, you probably only want to submit that if your test score isn't within their middle 50% range. There are some exceptions, but by and large, that's a good rule of thumb. And then test blind means no matter how great your test score is, they're not going to review that no matter what. UC is an example of that, where they're not going to review your test scores, even if you have a perfect score. So to be knowledgeable about that, first of all, is important. And then to work with someone like us or anywhere else that can help you kind of come up with the strategy for you that makes sense of where to send your test score, should you have one, and what that's going to mean is going to be really important. At the end of the day, testing is important, but the transcript will have the most weight and always has carried the most weight. So don't let anything else get in the way of the good work you're doing in the classroom. They want to see how you're doing because that's the indicator of how you will show up on campus. With that said, I will turn it back over to Kelsey for a little bit more information about admission review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I love that analogy of the painting. And I really think, when we go back to this transcript, you can see here, this is our kind of very broad strokes overview of how many admissions offices out there are going to look at the different component parts of any application and how they kind of tend to shake out in terms of importance. But it is important to really note that the devil is in the details here, and everything about this process is incredibly complex and incredibly nuanced. So this is going to vary slightly or wildly from campus to campus. So like I said, this is our broad picture from 20 feet back. And if we're thinking about Andy's analogy a little bit more closely with the transcript, for example, you can see it is and always has been the single biggest component part of any admissions decision. They have to be sure that you're going to be successful, because it's not for them just about admission. It's about success over 4 years. It's about you being able to graduate and then move forward, proudly bearing the stamp of whatever college you go to and carrying their good name out into the world. With the transcript, as Andy so wisely said, it isn't just about the GPA. It's actually about the whole picture that your transcript paints. Your rigor, yes, but also like what trends are contained in there. What have you become a better and better student as you've gone through all 4 of your years? So really, juniors, this is the time for you to pay close attention to everything that you're doing to get the best possible grades that you can, and that hopefully you have in all 4 of your soon to be 4 years, but 3 years. what you're spending your time, what's meaningful for you outside of the classroom. You can see how this kind of shakes out. You can see that before, when most schools required tests, that around 20% of the decision might be tests, because that was all part of your academic profile. Now, we estimated at about 6%, though of course at the UC campuses, it's at about 0%, because they don't consider it at all. You can't even submit them. The essays have always been important, but as you can see, it's maybe 25% of the decision-making process. The essays are, going to help them understand who you are, but are not going to be the thing that gets you in or keeps you out of any particular college in general. One thing that we noted when we were talking to lots of our admissions officer colleagues was that, especially through the pandemic, with changing transcripts, with students being online, they felt like they had less information that was accurate about the students' abilities in the classroom. So letters of recommendation actually became more important. And Andy, why don't you talk a little bit about demonstrated interest for us?
Sure, absolutely. So as I've mentioned briefly before, whether you're visiting a college campus, be sure you fill out the registration, you attend the tour, and the information session. Just don't go wander the campus by yourself. If you have a rep coming to your high school, fill out the inquiry card, even if you're filling it out for a second time. College fair, same rules applies. Email, I think that's where students really sometimes don't follow through, and understandably, because you're getting a whole lot of email from a whole lot of colleges. We don't expect you to open up every single one, but for the colleges that are on your list that you care about, do open those, do click on the links, and not just to demonstrate interest. They are tracking that in many cases, but to inform yourself, to get more information about what they're sharing with you. Again, that might become really valuable information in terms of whether one of your supplemental essays. Ultimately, we don't really know from one college to the next how demonstrated interest is used, how much weight it carries. However, it's better to err on the side of letting them know you have been engaged, whether that's from all the way back to freshman year or just starting now. Because if you're on that borderline of transcript, test score, letters of rec, you could be admitted, maybe you could be waitlist or deferred. Something like demonstrated interest might move the needle if you have provided the indicator that, given the opportunity, you would show up in the fall.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add that for demonstrated interest, this is something that moves the needle a little bit for students that are already academically admissible. So it's not going to be the thing that gets you in if you aren't already kind of in the running, but it can be the thing that makes the difference between you and another similar student who's very competitive, because the school wants to know, like, hey, how likely is it that you're going to attend, just as Andy said.
That's right, exactly.
So as we kind of wrap up, I just want to give you all a plug to start early, whether you get help from an organization like ours, whether you work with us, or whether you choose to do this with the resources that are provided from your high school. One thing that I want to point out is, in general, in our work, this is just a really good data point for you, about almost 90% of our students will get into at least one of their top 3 choices as a result of their work with us. At least 2 out of 3 have at least 5 or more yes letters coming in. So we have really, really good stats, but our data from students who start earlier than the second semester of junior year, which is already early in some people's minds, start earlier with a little bit of that low stakes exploration, like what we were talking about earlier, blow that statistic out of the water, because they get into at least one of their top 3 choice colleges at a rate of 100%, which is a significant difference, as you can see. The reason I want to point this out to all of you is that this is, yes, we have a lot of magic and expertise that we're able to sprinkle onto our students and help them. However, the reason that this works so well is because the students who start early are more intentional with their time. They know themselves better. They know the college landscape better. And so when it comes to building their list in the spring, they build better college lists, and they end up being happier when they get to college. So this is all a plug for all of you to start early. And of course, if you would like to have our help, we would love for you to reach out. I'm going to throw our contact link into the chat in just a minute. But as we close things out, I am just curious, when we're thinking about the luxury of time, when we're thinking about all of our juniors out there, Andy, what as a counselor, what wisdom do you have to share with our listeners? What would you want them to kind of know as they go into the second half of their junior year?
Absolutely. I think my biggest tip is to control what you can. And what I mean by that is there is a lot you cannot control in this process. That's part of what makes it hard. You're asked to do a lot of work, make yourself vulnerable through this writing, and then you send off this application, and you have to wait, right? But what you can control is your attitude. You can control the research that you do on different colleges, as we've discussed how to do that. You can control how curious you are, engaged or not engaged you are. And again, by starting early, you're going to give yourself, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable at first, time to become more familiar with what this means, this process looks like, so it is less daunting. The last thing I'll say about what you can control is how much information you share with other people. I think everybody, school, parents, and students alike, want to support each other and have each other's back. Everyone's going through this together. At the same time, be cognizant of how much information you're putting out there about your test score, about your list, so on and so forth, because sometimes keeping that a little bit closer to home is, again, a piece of control that you might be glad you held on to later on. Kelsey, I'd love to ask you the same question. What do you want our viewers to know?
I loved your advice, Andy, and I'll just say that after years of working with students, I want students and parents to know that every single student comes to the table thinking that they don't have enough to offer, thinking that they don't have a story to tell, thinking that they haven't done enough that's impressive, really coming from that place of insecurity. And I want you to know that year after year, student after student, they're wrong. I want you to know that students, you are enough. You, exactly as you are, have something unique. You have everything within you. If you tap into that and you really do your college research well, that is going to blow the right colleges away and have them so eager and so excited to bring them into their doors, because those right colleges are out there and they are looking for you. There is a fantastic spot for you. So many students, whether they're high achieving or whether they struggled in high school, really feel like they don't have enough. But I want you to know that you do have enough, and you've got this. You have this. So with that, I want to turn it over to our audience. We want to answer a few questions. We haven't left ourselves a ton of time, and I'm sorry about that, but I want to give you a chance to go ahead and throw your questions into the comments box on your respective platforms. I have a couple of comments or questions from the audience already, but please go ahead and add any additional ones that you have while we talk. So Andy, one of the questions that I'm seeing come in is kind of about testing scores. How do you figure out whether to submit or not submit a test score? What are some of the factors that you would recommend a family consider?
Yeah, really, really great question. So I think the first place is to research the college, whether it's their website, speaking with the counselor, and find out what their middle 50% is. So that lower 25% to that upper 75th percent range of test scores as you look at the whole range overall. And if your test score is within that range, good indicator to send it. That's probably going to help you in the process. There are exceptions where perhaps if that test score range, let's say, is between a 30 and a 32, that's their middle 50% for XYZ college, and you're at a 30, you're really close to that, but maybe your GPA is just a little bit lower than the average college GPA, probably still okay to send that. Worth having a conversation, worth talking to someone, because some of these things are very nuanced, but there are exceptions where if one element is slightly lower than what that college is looking for, then that test score, even if it's not in that middle 50% range, but really close to it, could still help you. At the end of the day, I think it's also a matter of what you're trying to show the college, how strong your writing might be, the type of recommendations your school is able to send, depending on their resource and time commitment. So there's a lot that goes into it, but ultimately talk to us, talk to a college advisor, or someone else if you have questions, because like so much in this process, every situation is very unique and individual.
Wow. I mean, I already know all of everything that you said, but my mind is still a little bit boggled because it's just, it sounds like it's really nuanced from school to school, from student to student, and there's no real cookie cutter answer. So I think your advice to definitely seek advice from the people who are trusted adults in your life, even admissions officers on specific campuses, can be super helpful.
Yeah.
Another question that I'm seeing is about advice. How many colleges do most people apply to? What is recommended? What I'll say about that, and Andy, of course, feel free to chime in, is that most students that we're seeing are applying to a few more schools than they would have a few years back before the test optional movement. We're seeing people apply to, generally speaking, around 10 schools, sometimes a little more, 8, sometimes a little bit more, a little bit less, 8, a little bit more, 12. But around 10 schools is great because it gives you enough room to reach as appropriate to wherever you are, while also making sure that you anchor those reaches with schools you're excited about, but that you have a strong shot, whether that's like right in your target range or more like a likely school of getting into. Because remember that at the end of the day, the goal is for you to go to college, for you to attend, not just to apply to a list of super impressive schools. So I'd say around 10. What are your thoughts, Andy?
I would agree. I think it really depends on where you're starting. This is a family conversation as well, as there may be reasons to stay closer to home, or if your parents are like my parents were, really wanted you to spread your wings and go far away. Ultimately, I think it comes down to balance on that list. And as Kelsey mentioned, with the increased number of colleges that students are applying to, as we've seen over the years, we sometimes see students who are applying to many more highly selective schools. Sometimes that's okay, sometimes that's not the best idea. We can talk more about that. But if you're applying to a large number of highly selective schools, it's not a matter of you being able to do the work, it's a matter of how many spaces they have available to offer students.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, it's going to be important that you apply to a number of likely and possible and likely schools as well, but not just to do that to, again, have them on the list as backups, but to be schools that you really have researched, have enjoyed, have seen things about, where you could be happy if those were your options. So again, a little bit different for everyone, but I think that 8 to 10 range really works well for a lot of students.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. Well, I think that is just about as much as we have time for. So I want to really thank everybody so much for coming. If you haven't scanned that QR code yet, make sure that you do so that you can get your awesome gift. I did earlier throw the contact information for us into the chat box. So if you'd like more information, if you'd like to have a conversation about your child's specific circumstances, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much, everybody, and
everyone.
Have a wonderful night.
Good night. Bye-bye.